In a world where everyone is shouting to be seen, where opinions echo endlessly, and attention is the most traded currency, those who learn to remain still, those who speak with precision, not noise, begin to radiate a different kind of presence. The kind that doesn't beg to be noticed but demands to be respected. We live in an age where being loud is mistaken for being powerful, where popularity is confused with influence. But there is a quiet rebellion taking place beneath the surface, one led not by those who seek approval, but by those who no longer need it. This is not about being liked. It's about something deeper, more permanent, and far less common. It's about being respected in a way that cannot be faked or negotiated. Respect, true respect, is never granted to the one who chases it. It gravitates instead toward those who carry themselves with quiet certainty, those who do not ask for permission to exist, who do not flinch under pressure, who do not decorate their presence with theatrics. And above all, it belongs to those who have mastered one rare art in today's world, the art of self-command. The Stoics understood this long before our modern chaos began. They knew that power didn't come from what others thought of you, but from what you refused to let control you. They didn't teach dominance through volume, but through discipline, not through appearance, but through essence. To them, power was internal. It was the ability to move through life untouched by praise or insult, guided not by emotion, but by reason. The 7 cold behaviors you're about to hear will not make you the most liked person in the room. They will not make you more relatable, or more emotionally available, or more understood. In fact, they may do the opposite. They will create distance. They will silence unnecessary conversations. They will draw a line in the sand between you and the approval-hungry masses. But make no mistake, they will make you powerful, because there is something undeniably magnetic about a person who is rooted in themselves. Someone who doesn't over-explain, someone who doesn't overshare, someone who doesn't overreach. This is not about cruelty. This is not about arrogance. This is about clarity. It's about knowing who you are and no longer negotiating that with the world. So if you're tired of being overlooked, interrupted, underestimated, if you've been kind for too long, soft-spoken for too long, endlessly available for too long, it's time to embody the quiet strength that commands attention without asking for it. Let's begin. 1. Saying less, doing more. You act with purpose, not to impress. In a world obsessed with words, where people announce every move before making it, where plans are spoken louder than the discipline required to execute them, there is something deeply unsettling, almost threatening, about the person who simply acts, who speaks only when necessary, who lets results echo louder than any speech ever could. The Stoics taught that words are cheap when compared to action, and even cheaper when they are used as currency for validation. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, wrote to himself, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." In this sentence lies a powerful reminder. Those who truly know themselves have no interest in proving themselves. Saying less is not a lack of opinion, intelligence, or power. On the contrary, it's a refusal to spend those things carelessly. The more you talk about what you'll do, the less you tend to do, because speaking creates the illusion of progress. It tricks the brain into thinking the mission is already accomplished, and so one gets applause for a goal not yet achieved, and with that applause, the fire cools, the hunger fades. To act with purpose and not with performance, that is the cold behavior we're talking about. You walk into a room not explaining yourself, not oversharing your dreams, not rehearsing a monologue for others to admire. You simply do. You move, you create, you build. You live in such a way that your existence becomes evidence. This is why those who talk less often hold more power. They don't show their hand because they don't need to. They don't correct every misunderstanding because they don't base their worth on being seen correctly. And they don't waste energy trying to be impressive because they're already committed to becoming undeniable. The world doesn't respect noise. It respects proof. And those who talk endlessly about what they will do usually reveal more about their insecurity than their strength. But those who remain grounded in action, anchored in discipline, show the kind of composure that cannot be faked. And in that composure, others sense something rare: self-mastery. Stoicism at its core is about alignment between what you say, what you do, and who you are. But the modern world reverses this order. People craft an image, say things to uphold that image, and then scramble to become what they pretended to be. This is the fast track to burnout, disillusionment, and a fragile identity. But when you flip the script, when you first become something real, then act accordingly and only speak when necessary, people begin to trust what you say, not because it's charming, but because it's rare, because your words are rooted in something solid. To say less is not to hide, it is to concentrate your power. To do more is not to prove, it is to honor your potential. And to act with purpose rather than performance is to exit the exhausting stage of life where you're always trying to impress others, and enter the silent arena where you begin to truly respect yourself. So the next time you're tempted to explain your plans, to outline your ambition in a room full of half-interested faces, remember this: you don't need to be heard to be powerful, and the more you let your actions speak, the more people will listen, even in your silence. 2. Emotional detachment. You feel everything but show nothing. To most people, strength is confused with numbness. They believe that to be stoic is to feel nothing, to walk through life cold, distant, indifferent to joy or pain. But that is not detachment, that is deadness. And the Stoics were not dead inside. The truth is far more powerful and far more difficult. A truly stoic mind feels everything: the pain, the chaos, the insult, the grief, the weight of being alive, but shows nothing that isn't chosen. It's not about pretending to be invulnerable. It's about mastering what is revealed. This is emotional detachment, not the absence of feeling, but the refusal to be ruled by it. You can cry and still be detached. You can ache, rage, burn on the inside, and still keep your voice calm, your posture steady, your actions aligned with reason. That is real power, not the suppression of emotion, but the transmutation of it into clarity, because feelings are waves, sometimes crashing, sometimes still, but the Stoic becomes the shoreline. He does not fight the tide, nor does he drown in it. He allows the emotion to pass through, and only then does he respond. Not react, respond. Modern life celebrates emotional exposure. People are told to be raw, be vulnerable, be transparent at all costs, as if bleeding publicly were a sign of truth. But the cost of emotional overexposure is high. When you show everything you feel, you give others the blueprint to manipulate you. You hand them the levers of your inner world. You become easy to provoke, easy to decode, easy to control. Detachment, by contrast, makes you unreadable, and what cannot be read cannot be played. The less others can predict your emotional reactions, the more they are forced to adjust themselves around your calm. Your silence becomes unsettling, your stillness becomes dominant. Because people don't fear rage, they fear the unknown. And here lies the paradox. Emotional detachment does not make you robotic, it makes you sovereign. It is what allows you to function under pressure, to remain poised when insulted, to choose strategy over self-sabotage. To hear something that cuts deep, and still decide who you want to be in the next breath. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That strength begins when you stop treating emotions like commands and start treating them like weather, unpredictable but passing. You don't fight the storm, you simply don't build your house in it. This doesn't mean you disconnect from your humanity. It means you stop placing your identity in emotional chaos. You are not your anger, you are not your sadness, you are not your jealousy or despair or disappointment. You are the one who observes all of it and chooses what to express and when. People around you will start to notice. They'll provoke you and get nothing. They'll project insecurities, bait you into reaction, try to penetrate the silence, and it won't work. Not because you don't feel it, but because you've mastered the sacred pause between emotion and expression. You've become disciplined enough to protect your peace from their storms. In the end, emotional detachment is not coldness, it's temperature control. It's being the one who decides how hot things get. It's the realization that self-respect begins where reactivity ends, and that nothing says power more than a person who sees everything, feels everything, and still chooses calm. 3. Not needing validation. Your worth isn't up for public vote. There comes a moment in every person's life, quiet, subtle, but deeply transformative, when they realize that their value cannot continue to be negotiated in the court of public opinion. That who they are cannot be placed on a pedestal to be rated, liked, commented on, or clapped for by people who don't carry the weight of their soul, don't bleed their wounds, and certainly don't sit in silence with the decisions they must live with every day. In a society that feeds on attention and trains us to look outward for our sense of worth, choosing not to seek validation becomes an act of quiet rebellion, a cold, unshakable stance that says, "I am not available for your approval." This is not defiance born from bitterness. It's not arrogance masked as strength, it's clarity. It's the realization that as long as you outsource your self-worth to others, you remain a prisoner in your own life, chained not by force, but by your hunger to be seen. The Stoics, more than any other school of thought, understood this danger. They taught that inner peace could never be reached while our self-image remained at the mercy of other people's shifting moods and opinions. Epictetus warned that the man who seeks to please everyone will lose himself in the process, because no external validation can ever replace the authority of a well-governed soul. You become unbreakable the moment you stop needing to be understood. You become powerful the moment you no longer crave to be liked. You walk into a room not hoping to be accepted, but knowing that your presence already carries weight. Not because others confirm it, but because you've spent enough time in solitude, in silence, in reflection, to understand who you are and what you stand for. And this kind of self-possession is rare, rare enough to be intimidating, rare enough to be misinterpreted as cold, arrogant, or aloof. But that's the price of sovereignty, to be misread by the many, so that you may remain intact for the few who truly see you, and, more importantly, for yourself. When your sense of worth depends on others' reactions, you will find yourself constantly adjusting, softening your edges when they find you too intense, playing small when they find you too ambitious, hiding your truth when they find it too uncomfortable. But the more you mold yourself to be accepted, the more invisible you become to yourself, until one day the mirror reflects not a person, but a collage of borrowed identities stitched together by fear. Not needing validation doesn't mean rejecting connection. It means removing performance from the equation. It means no longer performing strength to be seen as competent, no longer performing pain to be seen as relatable, no longer performing joy to make others comfortable. It means telling the truth without decoration, being disliked without anxiety, and standing alone without collapse. And here lies the paradox. The moment you stop chasing validation, you become infinitely more respected. People sense that your value does not fluctuate based on applause, that your mood is not tied to their approval, that your confidence does not need to be constantly fed. And because they cannot influence your sense of self, they stop trying to diminish it. You become a presence that reshapes the room, not because you're loud, but because you're grounded. Marcus Aurelius once said, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." This contradiction is at the heart of most suffering, and only when you sever that dependence, when you begin to live not for praise but for principle, does the noise finally fade. So let them have their opinions. Let them misunderstand you. Let them project their fears, their judgments, their doubts. That is not your burden to carry. You were never meant to live on a leash made of applause. You were meant to walk freely, governed by something higher, something the crowd cannot give you and therefore cannot take away. Your worth isn't up for vote, it never was, and the day you stop campaigning for approval is the day you step fully into your own authority. 4. Setting boundaries. Without guilt. No is a full sentence. There's a subtle kind of suffering that creeps into your life when you say yes too often, not because you want to, but because you feel you must. A slow erosion of self-respect begins to take place every time you prioritize someone else's comfort over your own clarity. Every time you bend yourself into unnatural shapes to avoid conflict, rejection, or judgment. And if you're not careful, that pattern becomes permanent. You begin to mistake compliance for kindness. You begin to believe that being needed is the same thing as being respected. But there is nothing noble about constantly betraying yourself to be seen as agreeable. The Stoics taught that the wise man is not easily moved, not by praise, not by insult, and certainly not by social pressure. And boundary setting, though not always loud or visible, is one of the most stoic acts of strength a person can cultivate. Because it demands not only self-awareness, but the courage to disappoint others in order to remain loyal to yourself. And in a culture that rewards overextension, people-pleasing, and emotional overexposure, saying no without guilt becomes an act of inner revolution. No is not aggression. It is not coldness. It is not a rejection of connection. It is a commitment to self-respect. It says, I know my limits. I honor my time. I protect my energy. And anyone who takes offense to that has likely benefited from your lack of boundaries for far too long. The problem is, we are conditioned from an early age to see boundaries as selfish. We are taught that good people are always available, always flexible, always willing to help, even at the cost of their own well-being. But what the Stoics understood, what so many of us forget, is that without inner order, there is no virtue. You cannot pour from a fractured cup. You cannot be useful to the world if you are constantly at war with yourself. And you cannot claim self-mastery if you allow guilt to guide your decisions. Setting boundaries without guilt requires stillness. It requires that you pause and ask yourself, am I doing this from love or from fear, from authenticity or from anxiety? And when the answer reveals that your yes is really a disguised no, you must be willing to stand in the discomfort of that truth. You don't need to explain your limits to be justified in them. You don't need to soften your no with 1,000 apologies. You don't need to give a full essay defending your decisions to people who were never entitled to your time in the first place. The moment you begin over-explaining, you invite negotiation. But when you say no with quiet finality, with the calm that says, I don't need you to understand, I just need you to accept, the conversation ends before manipulation begins. And yes, people will be uncomfortable. They'll say you've changed, they'll call you distant, cold, unavailable. But what they're really saying is that you're no longer easily controlled. You're no longer predictable. You're no longer emotionally bendable to their expectations. And that's not a flaw. It's a sign that your spine has returned. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. But we might add, if it costs you peace, don't accept it. If it dishonors your truth, don't allow it. And if someone asks for more than you can give, remember, you owe people your honesty, not your compliance. You are not cold for setting boundaries. You are not heartless for protecting your space. You are not rude for prioritizing your values. You are simply no longer available to be consumed by the needs and projections of others. And when you reach that point, when you can say no without tension in your chest, without a knot in your stomach, without rehearsing excuses, you'll find that the people who truly respect you won't be offended. Because people who live with boundaries recognize them in others. And those who only loved your compliance were never interested in your freedom. So let your no be complete. Let it be clean. Let it be enough. You are not a product for others to access at will. You are a sovereign being, worthy of space, protection, and silence. And in that silence, your true self begins to speak again. 5. Direct eye contact without flinching. Calm, focused, unshakable. There is a quiet confrontation that happens when two people lock eyes, an invisible exchange that has little to do with words and everything to do with presence. In that instant, truth is exposed, confidence is tested, power is measured. And those who are not rooted in themselves almost always look away first. Direct eye contact is not about dominance for the sake of intimidation. It is about demonstrating with silent clarity that you are fully present in yourself, not retreating, not apologizing, not second-guessing your right to exist in the space you occupy. It is not aggression, it is not arrogance, it is an internal posture made visible. The posture of someone who is not seeking to win the moment, but who refuses to surrender it. In the eyes of a Stoic, this is not a performance. It is not about staring longer to prove superiority. It is not a social game. It is a reflection of inner stillness, a mirror of the disciplined mind that does not flee discomfort, that does not evade tension, that does not collapse under scrutiny. To hold someone's gaze calmly is to say, I am not hiding anything, not from you and not from myself. It is to stand in full awareness of who you are, flaws and all, without shrinking or inflating. This steadiness becomes magnetic. It doesn't demand attention, it commands it. Not through noise, but through the sheer gravity of your undisturbed presence. Most people look away not because they are guilty or weak, but because they are uncentered. Their mind races while their eyes tremble. They are caught between the fear of being seen and the desire to be approved. And in that hesitation, in that microsecond of avoidance, respect is quietly lost. But when your gaze is grounded in calm observation, when you are not trying to assert control and not allowing yourself to be controlled, you move into a different category of presence entirely. One that doesn't chase status, doesn't beg for attention, and doesn't blink when someone tries to size you up. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig." Eye contact becomes a reflection of this very act. When you've done the inner digging, when you've met your own darkness and didn't flinch, you no longer need to avert your gaze in the face of someone else's intensity. You can look at another person and remain still because you've already faced the most uncomfortable thing of all, yourself. It's not the eyes alone that communicate strength. It's what's behind them. It's the absence of panic, of approval-seeking, of restless ego. It's the message, I am here fully, and I do not fear being seen. This unsettles people, not because it's hostile, but because it's rare. In a world where most people are scanning, avoiding, or performing, meeting someone whose gaze is steady and silent is unnerving. It reminds them of something they forgot they were allowed to be: present. This is not about turning every conversation into a power struggle. It's about restoring dignity to your presence. It's about moving through the world like someone who has nothing to prove and nothing to hide, because you've already done the inner work, and that work radiates not through loudness but through precision, not through intimidation but through unwavering calm. And in moments of conflict, when voices rise and tempers flare, the one who can hold eye contact without flinching, without losing breath or posture, will often hold the frame. They will not need to raise their voice, defend themselves emotionally, or retaliate impulsively. Their steadiness becomes the anchor, and in a room of emotionally volatile people, the anchor is the one who leads. So the next time someone challenges you, through words, energy, posture, do not rush to respond with more noise. Do not compete for attention. Simply look, not to intimidate, not to perform, just to witness. And let that gaze speak the truth. I see you clearly, but I am not moved. That is what it means to be calm, focused, unshakable. That is what it means to live with Stoic eyes. 6. Silence in conflict. You don't argue, you observe. There is a moment, often invisible to the untrained eye, when conflict reveals more about a person than years of conversation ever could. It is not found in their words but in their reactions, in how quickly they raise their voice, in how urgently they need to be right, in how threatened they feel by disagreement, and in that precise moment, while others are scrambling to win, to dominate, to prove, the Stoic does something different. He withdraws into silence, not out of fear, not out of weakness, but out of something far rarer: composure. To remain silent in the midst of conflict is not passivity, it is not surrender. It is the conscious rejection of a war that cannot be won, because its battlefield was never truth, but ego. The Stoic knows that most arguments are not about ideas, they are about identity. They are not about solving, but about posturing. And entering into them, especially with emotional urgency, is to sacrifice the very self-command one has spent years building. When someone insults you, when they misrepresent you, when they bait you with provocation masked as conversation, silence becomes a weapon, not of aggression, but of containment. It says, without needing to say anything, "I am not yours to control." Because to argue is to engage on someone else's terms. To argue is to take the bait. To argue is to step into a fire and pretend it was your idea to burn. The Stoic instead listens, observes, analyzes not only the words spoken, but the emotion beneath them. He watches the trembling of the voice, the need for validation, the desperation to win, and he knows that matching that energy does not elevate him, it entangles him. Silence in conflict does not mean compliance. It does not mean you are unaware or uninterested. It simply means you've mastered the art of conserving energy, of refusing to feed chaos with more chaos, of stepping outside the emotional storm and choosing with quiet certainty to be the eye of it, not another gust of wind. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And perhaps nowhere is this more applicable than during conflict, because the moment you match another person's anger, you become a mirror of their worst impulses. You lose the power to see clearly. You become reactive, scattered, and most of all, predictable. And what is predictable can be manipulated. But silence is unreadable, it's unnerving. It forces the other to confront their own escalation without the distraction of your defensiveness. It holds a mirror to their behavior, not by preaching, but by refusing to participate. There is strength in saying nothing, especially when saying something would only feed a cycle of emotional inflation. It takes more power to stay calm in the face of provocation than to win an argument. And ironically, it is that calm, not the words, that earns respect in the end. You'll find over time that people remember the one who did not flinch, who did not spiral, who did not lose themselves when tested. They may not say it, but they will feel it. Your silence carried more weight than their shouting ever could, because it wasn't about winning, it was about not giving your peace away. And yes, there will be moments when silence will be misunderstood. When people accuse you of being passive, evasive, or even cold. But remember, those who need noise to feel powerful cannot understand the discipline of stillness. Let them misunderstand. You are not here to be deciphered by everyone. You are here to remain intact. So the next time conflict rises around you, when voices climb, when tempers flare, when egos collide, step back, breathe, observe, and say nothing until speaking becomes a conscious choice, not an emotional reflex. Because silence in conflict is not weakness, it is strategy, it is sovereignty. It is the unshakable strength of someone who no longer needs to win every battle, because they've already mastered themselves. 7. Walking away without explaining. Not every door deserves to be closed gently. There comes a time in your life when the most powerful thing you can do is leave, quietly, completely, and without ceremony. Not out of spite, not out of bitterness, but out of the calm, grounded understanding that your presence is a gift, and not every room deserves to keep it. The Stoic does not announce his departure. He simply recognizes when a situation, a dynamic, a connection, or a battle has already expired, and he moves on. You are not obligated to justify your exit to those who never took the time to understand your presence. You don't owe long explanations to people who made a habit of crossing your boundaries. You don't need to break yourself into fragments just to leave someone whole. There is a grace in silence and a dignity in absence that no monologue can match. We are conditioned to believe that every ending must be poetic, that we must explain ourselves, make others feel comfortable with our distance, offer closure like it's a duty we owe for simply choosing ourselves. But the truth is, not every door needs to be closed gently. Some doors were never meant to be opened in the first place. Some were held open too long out of fear, guilt, or habit. And when it's time to walk away, it's not cruelty that chooses quiet, it's wisdom. The Stoics taught that detachment is not about coldness, but clarity. To walk away without explaining is to say, with quiet confidence, I've seen enough, I've felt enough, I've learned what I needed to learn. And now I reclaim my energy. It is not dramatic. It is not impulsive. It is simply the end of negotiation with others, with your past self, with the fantasy of who someone could have been if you had just tried harder. When you reach this level of self-command, you begin to realize that closure is not something another person gives you. It's something you decide to give yourself. The closure isn't in the explanation. It's in the boundary you enforce. It's in the peace you choose. It's in the decision to no longer exhaust your energy proving your pain, your worth, or your reason for leaving. People may accuse you of being heartless when you leave without explanation. They may say you changed, became distant, unrecognizable. But what they're really saying is that you stopped playing the role they assigned you. You stopped softening your truth to preserve their comfort. You stopped offering endless clarity to those who never truly listened in the first place. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That includes the power to decide when something no longer serves your evolution. When staying becomes self-betrayal, when silence speaks louder than justification ever could. This kind of walking away isn't about abandonment. It's about returning to yourself. It's about reclaiming your time, your mental real estate, your emotional bandwidth. It's not about proving that you're right. It's about honoring the fact that you don't need to stay somewhere just to be seen as kind. The world doesn't teach you how to leave without guilt. It teaches you to endure, to fix, to tolerate, to explain. But the Stoic knows that not every broken thing should be repaired. Not every connection is sacred. Not every chapter requires a conclusion signed by both parties. Some chapters are closed by the mere act of turning the page, without a sound. And that turning, done with self-respect, is more powerful than any long goodbye could ever be. So walk away when your inner silence grows louder than the noise around you. Walk away when you've said all that needed to be said, internally, not aloud. Walk away when your peace is no longer negotiable. And do so without explaining, without defending, without looking back to see if they understood. Because sometimes the most stoic thing you can do is to close the door, not with a speech, but with your absence. Respect is not earned through performance. It is not granted to those who speak the loudest, please the most, or explain themselves endlessly. It is reserved for those who master themselves first, those who do not chase validation, do not fold under pressure, and do not negotiate their boundaries to maintain appearances. Each of these 7 cold behaviors is not about becoming detached from your humanity, but about becoming anchored in it. They are not tools for cruelty, but for clarity. Not weapons to dominate others, but shields to protect your peace. They invite you to live with quiet discipline in a world addicted to noise, to respond instead of react, to observe instead of argue, to leave instead of beg to be understood. The Stoics didn't seek to be feared or adored. They sought to be unshakable. And that is the kind of power that cannot be faked. It's the kind that enters a room without needing attention and leaves it without needing applause. So remember, your value is not up for public vote. Your silence is not weakness. Your boundaries are not cruelty. And your absence can be just as commanding as your presence. Thank you for watching. If this resonated with you, subscribe to the channel for more content that honors strength, presence, and the power of becoming untouchable from the inside out. Because when you stop performing, the world starts paying attention.